everyone. Welcome to another exciting Pathfinder 2e lecture. I am Jason Bulmahn, the Director of Game Design at Paizo, and today I am joined by my good buddy, Dan. Hey there, Dan.
Oh, Jason, what's happening? Okay, well, here I am. What's
Yeah,
going on,
no,
everybody? How are you?
no waiting. No waiting. We're jumping right into it today. We got a lot to do. So... Dan, we've done a lot over the past few weeks. We took last week off. I had a lot of stuff to do to get my my Kickstarter for Hopefinder up and off the ground. But I did want to come back and continue our seminar series here, and to talk about something that you've never done before, right? You've never been a GM in Pathfinder before, so you've never had a reason to interact with many of the tools that GMs use. And one of the most important tools in a GM's bag of tricks is the ability to create new and interesting monsters. Dan, do you like monsters?
Well, it depends. Do I like monsters inherently? No. I think that they are the one barrier to success whenever I'm playing in an RPG. But, however, it would be boring without them, so I understand that we need them. And you're right. I've never had the curtain pulled back. I've never been brought behind the velvet rope of how to make a monster. So this is all new to me.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take you behind that velvet rope. This is me clicking the little brass fob there and pulling it wide and being like, "Come, we are going to go and we're going to make a monster."
I must be in the front row. Let's go.
That's right. Right this way, sir. Now we're gonna go over here and swap over to our kind of work screen so that we can work on making a monster. And Dan, like anything in Pathfinder, the first thing we got to start with when it comes to creating a monster is an idea, right? You need to kind of know what it is you're trying to create, and then we'll walk through all of the steps of making and statting out a monster. It's actually pretty simple and something that when you become very proficient at it, you can almost do on the fly in a session, right? Where the players encounter something and you're like, it's roughly level 4. I know roughly what those stats are. Here's the monster. Hooray. We're not going to do that here today. We're going to be slow and deliberative, but
Okay.
It all starts in the same place, which is an idea. So, Dan, let's kind of talk through what kind of monster you want to make. Do you got an idea in mind?
I have a basic idea. I'm not going to lie. It's pretty basic. I don't have much, but I thought let's build off of what we've already created. All right. And I think that our bar restaurant that we made, definitely it needs a bouncer. We need to make a bouncer, I think, to populate this thing. And I don't know if it's just one bouncer at the front, or maybe this is a reoccurring type of creature that you'll find randomly scattered throughout the restaurant or whatever. But I kind of feel like we want to make a heavy that's out front, maybe a little bow tie and a suit with his arms folded in front of him that's just looking at you, waiting for you to do something. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Sure. So, for folks who maybe didn't catch that video, a few weeks back we did a video talking about how to build encounters and kind of how to build your own quick little adventure in Pathfinder. We'll put a link up there for that, so that if you wanna go check out that video, you can. But the gist of it was a dwarven restaurant where everyone had died and the place was filled with undead and constructs and stuff, and the PCs accidentally stumble into this place after going to rest in a cave that happened to be the front door of this place. So that's the kind of setup. So Dan, you're talking about building a bouncer type monster. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good place to start. Now, this dungeon, this setup was filled with undead and constructs. That was kind of the thing, because it's how long has it been here? A while. So nothing in there is alive. So it sounds to me like we're possibly building an undead creature, which, that certainly is a direction we could go. We could make it a construct as well, but I think undead might be a bit more interesting to play with here today.
Okay, I'm down.
All right. So if we're building an undead creature, the next piece of information that we need. So if you go to your game mastery guide, right? You know, and again, folks, I've chopped up this PDF to allow us to just skip to the relevant parts. And you jump down to page 56. You get to the creature building rules. And, you know, here we are, develop a concept. Step 1. So that is kind of the first thing you do. So we know we've got this bouncer monster. So, and it's undead. So we know a couple things about it, Dan, but let's dig a little deeper.
Let's do it.
Do you think this is the type of monster? I mean, obviously from being a bouncer, it sounds like this is a monster that's kind of a bruiser. Going to be a monster that beats you up.
Yeah. I'm thinking something along the lines, and look, I'm not trying to characterize, bouncers at all, but I'm thinking that something that's kind of hulking, something brutish, can take some damage, do some damage, but also maybe you can fool it a little bit. Maybe it's, it's not like super intelligent that it's going to be able to, do a lot of really cool things. So maybe that's its weakness. I don't know, does it need a weakness? Will we get into that? Do monsters inherently need a weakness? Is that something you got to do?
Monsters can have weaknesses. They don't have to. They may, sometimes you can give them a weakness to counter some other really powerful abilities they might have. You can think about those things now, but as we kind of walk through the process, we'll figure out whether or not any of them make sense.
Okay, cool.
So, so it does sound like we've got a big, shambling undead, probably not too fast. I can't imagine it being the type that rushes after you quickly. Probably does some pretty hefty damage with its melee attacks. Do you think it's a weapon user, or is it just use its fists?
Look, maybe it's got like a club or something if it needs it, but that's not its go-to. You know what I mean? Like that I'm thinking it's mostly just a bruiser.
Okay. All right. So we've got kind of that. All right.
It uses a whiskey bottle.
So it's certainly not going to be using. Well, there is something interesting there we could play with, that maybe it's really good at picking up objects in the environment and throwing them. Maybe that's its ranged attack. Is
That's
that it picks
not
up
bad.
things and throws them at you. I mean, that could be something it does.
So it like improvises, where it's like, anything around me that is not bolted to the ground can be a weapon, like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
Can throw chairs at you, bottles, plates, whatever. Doesn't really have a set ranged attack. Just kind of has the ability to kind of throw objects at you. Maybe.
Okay.
We'll play with that.
I think that's a solid idea. Let's put that on the board. We'll put a pin in that one. We'll come back to it because I like it.
Yeah. So we're working on a concept here. I feel like we're starting to narrow in on things. We can develop it more as we go along. So let's go here. There's a bit in here about kind of understanding statistics and understanding what, in the following pages, we're going to talk about statistics and kind of classify them as either, wow, that statistic is extreme for this creature. Maybe it's high, moderate, low, or terrible. And you kind of want to avoid the two ends. Creatures shouldn't be terrible at too many things unless there's a really good reason for them to be. Creatures should not be extreme in any things unless there's a really good reason for them to be. And mostly things should be low, moderate, or high, depending on the creature and what you're trying to do. So that's talking about that. And then it goes on to speak about the kind of push and pull of creature design, which is understanding that, you might give something a lot of hit points, but then give it a low AC. That way it expresses as kind of like, this is a monster that's really easy to hit. You're going to hit it all the time, but it can take one hell of a beating. That might actually be something we do for this creature in particular based on the concept. Maybe it's not great at dodging hits. It's not fast and agile. It's just really tough. It's just hard to take down. And there's a couple different ways we can explore doing that. We'll kind of get into that here in just a bit.
Okay.
So, the next big thing we need to do is determine its level. Now, level is really important because level is kind of sets its benchmarks. So, for example, if a creature is level 2 and you put a level 2 creature up against a level 2 party, it's considered, a pretty low threat. You'd have to include a couple of them to kind of challenge the party, because it's saying that the creature statistically is about the same power level as a creature of that level. That's not entirely accurate. There's some stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't really have to worry about that's built into the game engine, but that's the benchmark. So if we're saying this is a level 2 creature, that means it's appropriate for being a kind of more dangerous threat to level 1 parties, being a kind of average threat to level 2 parties. And once you get up to level 3 or 4 parties, it starts turning into kind of a mook and then not a threat at all.
Okay.
So we never really kind of fully decided the level of the dungeon we were doing. So I feel like we've got some play here. We can kind of make this whatever we want. I know we designed it as a level 1 dungeon. But for the purposes of this monster design, let's assume that this can be whatever level we want. Right?
Okay.
It doesn't have to be level 2. Let's actually make it a little higher level just so that we've got more statistics to play with.
Nice. Okay.
So I don't think we want to go super high level because a dungeon restaurant is not going to be a high level threat no matter what we do.
Are you sure? Come on, that's usually where the toughest of the tough like to go and hang out is a fancy restaurant, right?
Yeah. So I think what we probably want to do is shoot kind of maybe, 5, 6, 7. I don't know. Any of those numbers feel good to you, Dan?
Let's go lucky number 6.
6. All right. So we're going to say the creature is level 6. And at this point in time, Dan, I'm going to go ahead and bring up this. Here we are. We got a blank stat block. Nothing too special about it. Just blank stats. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to put 6 because that's the one thing we've decided thus far.
Okay. Oh, so okay, the X's are waiting to be filled in.
Yeah.
This isn't an adult-oriented encounter that you're designing right now.
No, it is not. No, there's only 2
Just making
X's.
sure.
So I am going to go in here. The second line here are monster traits. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put Undead in here because we do know that it's an undead creature. So I'm going to go ahead and get the Undead trait in here. We may add more traits as we go along. Traits are just kind of descriptive keywords that help us understand and remember what a creature is all about. In play, traits can be a signifier of certain rules affect this thing. So for example, if you've got a spell that does extra damage to undead, what that means is it's looking for that undead trait up in the stat block, right? So that trait being there would mean that undead things work against it. Okay, so we know that. Now, we got that. We also have a space here for alignment. Now, most undead are evil of some sort, right? There's some level of evil. So this could be lawful evil, in which case it follows strict kind of rules. Neutral evil, in which case it's just kind of there and is evil. And chaotic evil, which means it's just kind of a chaotic mess. I don't think it's chaotic evil. I think it's neutral or lawful.
I feel like, the position that it holds where it's enforcing rules, it's got to be, I mean, is it weird to say that it's lawful? Because it's enforcing the rules. So
we'll go and put LE in there for lawful evil. We got that kind of going now as well. All right. So
or is that Le Undead?
No.
Are we going international with our...
It is now a French bistro.
Fragile.
Nice. Le Undead. All right.
Sorry.
We should also get its size in here now that I think about it. So size is another trait we'll put in here. This goes right after the alignment trait. If I recall correctly, the dungeon wasn't so big that we could have large creatures running around here. So I think this thing has to be medium.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it can't be big and hulking for a medium creature. It's just still only medium.
Right. Okay. So it could be like a brick. Like it's short and squat and like you can't move it. It's the fastest thing in 3 feet. Yeah. Like beyond 3 feet, it's not going very fast after that.
I mean, it's the size of your party's barbarian, right? But it's very made of meat. All right, so
got it.
Let's go ahead and get back to this. So we've already started picking up some very important things here. Now, one of the next things we're going to do is we're going to start figuring out ability modifiers. Now, ability modifiers, these are important, but in monsters, they're mostly there to kind of just give us a sense of what the monster is kind of all about. They're not necessarily then used to calculate a bunch of other statistics. But I will say that knowing what they are is important when you're making other decisions so that the monster makes sense. And one way that I explain that is if a creature has a melee attack that uses strength and a ranged attack that uses dex, and its strength is a +4 and its dex is a +0, then its melee and ranged attack should not be the same number, because it's really not very dexterous, so its ranged attack should probably be less. Could it be 4 less? Maybe. But it doesn't have to be, but it should be a different number. It should be lower. Its range attack definitely shouldn't be higher than its melee attack. But that might tell you, oh, let me go back and swap my strength and dex because I actually want it to be more of a ranged character, right? So it's not a mandate, but it is one of those things that when you're deciding how the creature is going to play at the table, understanding that its stats, its ability modifiers aren't mandate, but they are informative, and you should play with them with the rest of your stat block. So let's go ahead, and what we're doing here is on this sheet. Box, go away, get out of here. Go up here.
Perfect.
Yeah, just get out of the way. It'll fade away just a sec. There we go. So if we look down here at the level 6, because that's the level we picked, you will notice that the extreme is +7, high is +5, moderate is +4, and low is +2. Anything below 2 is going to be considered kind of terrible. That doesn't mean it can't have a terrible score if we want it, but that's kind of where it needs to be. So I think, you know, we shouldn't necessarily be considering any 7s unless we have a really good reason to, right?
Okay.
Now, this creature is a big kind of hulking brute. That means its strength should definitely be high. But I don't know that it needs to be extreme. Extreme may be too much.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
So we generally recommend, hey, don't use extreme unless you've got a really damn good reason. Like, this is the fastest, this is the most agile creature in the world of its class, right? Oh, okay, give it extreme. But this isn't, we're not necessarily saying this is the strongest creature in the world for level 6. I don't think it needs a +7. So we do have a +5 though, and +5 makes perfect sense for strength. So that I'm thinking that, but outside that, Dan, I think we're kind of in an area where, go ahead and bring this back up. I already went in and changed the strength to from +XX to +5. Now we've got all these other stats as well. Now the creature is undead. Undead creatures sometimes are mindless, you know, and basically don't have much in the way of intelligence and stuff like that. So that is something we can play with. One other thing you can do that I recommend folks do is go and look at other monsters. This is an important part of kind of building up your understanding of how monsters work. So I'm just going to go and look at a mummy stat block. Why did I pick mummy? Well, mummy is, frankly, right around the same level. There's the Mummy Guardian, which is a 6th level creature. It is a bruiser. It is an undead. That's kind of its thing. So when I look at the mummy, right, I start seeing kind of what it's good at. And when I'm figuring out what this creature is, I'm going to want to make sure that, A, I'm just not making a mummy by a different name.
Yeah, it's a rewrapped mummy, essentially.
Yeah, it's been unwrapped, and it's eaten a bunch of, you know, candy bars, so it's bigger, right? That's not, it's not what I'm trying to make. But, you know, when I go and look at the mummy, right, I see that the mummy has a low int and not a very, it's got a mild charisma. It's got a pretty decent wisdom. And, you know, it's got an okay con. It's got next to no dex. And it's got a very good strength. So already we're saying that this mummy is similar to this, but we're going to want to make it different in other ways. So Dan, let's talk about its other statistics here. And what do you have in mind for, I mean, obviously it's not going to be a very dexterous creature. Con on an undead creature really is less important, but it is an indicator of how kind of tough the creature is. And then you've got your mental scores, right? Int, wisdom, charisma. What are you feeling?
Well, okay. I feel like here's the thing. It does have to have some charisma because it is the front line. and not all the people that are going to be there are bad. Some of them are whales. Some of them like got some money, and you want them to keep coming back. So it's like, or I guess in undead speak, it'd be like, good to see you, sir. Like, however it talks. I'm not going to put a voice on it necessarily. We're still building it, but it needs to, I mean, it is a greeter at its base. So it does need to be, I mean, somewhat able to see people and, that kind of thing. So that's my thought.
So one thing that you've kind of made clear here is that you think that this creature does have the ability to communicate. So it's probably not mindless.
I mean, I don't think it should be. What I don't think it should be able to do is think, like, in terms of a fight, it shouldn't be able to think much besides that person is not great. They don't need to be here. Let me just remove them, Hulk smash type thing. So I mean, that, like, when it comes to a fight, they're pretty much a one-track mind. That's my thought.
Okay. All right. So when we're looking at the ability scores, we've got int, which is just kind of raw knowledge. I don't think this creature needs much of that. Wisdom, which is its ability to spot things, but also kind of sense when it's being deceived. It's kind of useful in those sorts of situations. And then you've got charisma, which is how charming it is, but also its force of personality. So that's kind of where those land. Of those, which do you think is kind of the most important?
I think charisma. I wanted to be, because also it's neurolinguistics. Where if you can talk down the situation with this gravelly undead voice, then maybe I won't have to swing my pummel fists and throw chairs at you in a precise manner. I don't know.
All right, so let's go and give it. Now, we've got a range here from 2 to 5. I don't think it needs a 5, obviously. But I could easily see a 3 or a 4, Dan. What are you feeling there?
Let's go 3. Let's go 3.
3.
3.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's quickly round out its int and wisdom. I'm getting the sense that it's not very intelligent. So that could be a +0. That could even be a -1. It doesn't have to be that smart.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a thought there?
I think you're right. I think that's probably fair.
-1?
Yeah.
Right.
Let's try that. Because I mean, after we're done, we can kind of step back and look at it.
Yeah.
And kind of get a sense of what it's like, and then be like, yeah, maybe that shouldn't be a -1. Yeah,
I mean,
we can.
That's the great thing about these, is that you can kind of go back in the process. Unlike in Pathfinder First Edition, in Pathfinder Second Edition, you can kind of go back to earlier steps and just change things, and it doesn't necessarily cascade into having to make changes to the whole stat block again. In Pathfinder First Edition, if you went back and changed this number of hit dice, you literally had to recalculate the entire stat block. We don't have to do that anymore. So in this case, we can revisit these things. Let's talk wisdom. Okay. I think it should have at least a +2, because that's low for a creature of this level is a +2. And it should be decent at kind of spotting things and whatnot. It is a bouncer, but you did mention that it can be fooled. So maybe 2 is the right answer.
Okay. All right.
All right. So we got a 2. This thing's a wall of meat. Do you think it should have? I mean, con. I mean, con isn't going to give it extra hit points. We'll figure those out separately. But we could give it a higher con.
I feel like, now here's the thing. Are we, by choosing it to be undead, are we inherently saying that, like, for instance, it's undead, so it's evil? All right, cool. I get that. Sure. But also, when we look at the skills, right, are we inherently saying that, well, look, it's undead, so these skills have to be here?
No, there's in fact no strict guidelines like that. We will, when we're done with these ability scores, I think one thing we will do is jump to type. There is a little bit on creature type that we have to go through and fill in. But other than that, everything else is kind of discretionary.
Okay, all right.
So for con, yeah, I mean, this could be a 4. This could be a 2. This could be a 3. The only thing it's really going to affect is kind of, we will use it to kind of look at its fortitude save and make sure that it makes.
Okay. But well, let's start with 3, and then we'll see. Like, when we take it for a test run, we'll see if that makes sense.
All right. Now let's talk dex. What's the last score?
I think I don't see the dex being a very high stat for this poor fella.
We could actually make it a bad stat. Like it is almost clumsy.
But wait, if we were going with our original idea where it does improvise things like picks up a chair and throws it and does all of that stuff, do we need to have it have good? Is it ranged dex?
Yeah, ranged attacks are dex. So, but again, we don't necessarily build attacks based on these numbers, but we do use them to kind of inform what we are doing. So it shouldn't have a great ranged attack if its dex is 2. So we can kind of figure that out, but at the very least, we should say the dex is, I don't know, maybe just like a +1 or a +2 or something, right?
I think
doesn't have
+1. Let's go 1. All right. I say that we lowball the dex because I mean, that's what I would think.
Right. Okay. So there we go. We've done all that. Now I'm gonna go ahead and hide this. We're gonna go and let's go down here and look at traits real quick, because there is a bit here toward the end about trait abilities. And one thing you want to do is just come down here and look at Undead. It does say down here, it says traits. Almost all Undead are evil. Ghostly Undead have the incorporeal trait. Undead without minds, such as most zombies, have the mindless trait. We don't have to worry about that. There's a bit in here that says senses dark vision. So we should go in here. All Undead can see in the dark. So we're going to go ahead and put dark vision in, because they do get that. And then in immunities, there's a whole bunch of things that are Undead are immune to. So you're immune to death effects because you're already dead. You're immune to paralyze, poison, sleep, and that's it. If you're
and disease.
Oh yeah, sorry, I skipped disease. Look at that.
Yeah.
So you get all those for free. Those kind of come with the kit, as it were. And I've already gone ahead and put all those in. So there they are. The other things we'll leave be for now in this bit here. That's the only thing we really have to worry about right now. There are some other things, like you could give it other traits, like, oh, it's a fire undead, and then we would go and look at adding those. Now, one other thing that is of note here, because when we were talking, it came to me that this creature was intelligent. And the moment it's intelligent, we need to know what languages it's. So it's undead, and it's in a dwarf restaurant. So it probably knows Dwarven. And as undead, it probably knows Necril, which is the language of the undead.
Oh, cool. Okay. And then is it just assumed that common is in there? Is that just an assumed language for everybody, or with a monster, is it different?
Well, we would have to decide if it's speaking common. We would have to add that to the list right now. That's not an automatic.
Okay.
Do you think it knows common, or is this a place that was really for dwarves?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the Dwarven is way more important. That's fair.
All right. Okay. All right, so there, we got that. All right, so we've done ability modifiers. We're good on that front. Let's go to the next thing. The very next thing is senses and perceptions. Language is following it. I've kind of jumped around here a little bit. Let's figure out its perception. Now, for a level 6 creature, again, if you look at table 2-2, a level 6 creature has a range from about 17 to 11. 8 being kind of terrible. So that's its kind of range. Now, one thing I like to do just on base is take its level, add its wisdom, and add 2. And it probably shouldn't be lower than that.
Okay.
You don't have to do this. You can just pull something directly from this table. But one thing that I like to do is just kind of take a step back and kind of go, well, assuming it follows the basic rules of proficiency that everyone follows, it's got a wisdom of 2, its level is 6, so that's a minimum of 8. If it's proficient, if it's just trained in perception, it would have at least a 10. A 10 is slightly below low. So I would say that it might have like a 12.
Okay.
Like, you yourself said that maybe it can be fooled. Maybe you can sneak past it. Maybe that's the thing you can do. So maybe its perception shouldn't be that high. I know it's a bouncer, but the bouncer kind of is working under the assumption that you come walking right up to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Not that you try and sneak past it.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, okay. That does make a lot of sense.
All right. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to put this at a 12 for right now. Oh, one too many one. It almost ended up with a perception of 112. That would have been very good.
Oh,
okay.
That would be fun.
Yeah, no, it's very perceptive. Okay. So we just did languages. Those are fine. Let's go to the next table here. This is the skills table. Now, you'll notice, Dan, that we're starting to kind of go quickly here. Once we've got our concept, it's really just kind of a matter of filling in these numbers and kind of figuring out what the creature wants to do. So, a level 6 creature can have a handful of skills or only one or two, right? It doesn't need a ton of skills. It can have a few skills. And that's all it needs. So a level 6 creature, an extreme skill would be as high as 18, but high is around 15, and low goes down to about 9. So you're really dealing with 9 to 15. You have a little bit more play here in skills. If a creature only has an 8 or something, that's fine. You're basically saying it can do this. It's just not very good at it. Okay. Because skill DCs are kind of all over the place. But if you want it to be a skill that the creature is going to use actively and you want it to be good at it, this is the time that you're going to want to do. So let's think about skills here, Dan. And what kind of skills would this undead bouncer have?
Well, now when we're talking about this, is this where we need to start thinking about the types of defense it would do and what sort of attacks it might make and things like that?
Well,
do we need to start putting that in there?
So this might be a good time to start thinking about, well, if the one of the things the bouncer needs to be able to do is scare people, then it would need intimidate. Maybe we put in intimidate. If it needs to be able to identify the right people when they show up, maybe it needs society. If it needs to be able to pick someone up and throw them out the front door, it's gonna need athletics. Right?
Okay.
And you kind of want to think about this from the same direction that you would approach a character, right? If you want your character to be good at manhandling folks and throwing them out the door, then you're going to need athletics, right? That's same thing here with monsters. You can give it bespoke abilities later that work kind of differently, but those abilities should probably call back to these skills if they can, right? So if it has an ability later that is like toss a character,
right?
You know, we can build that ability.
Which is insulting. Being in a dwarven restaurant, that's very insulting, Jason. I can't believe you would say that.
It's rough. But my point is that ability should probably use athletics as part of its rules, right?
Yeah.
So we'll figure that out. But for right now, let's figure out its skills. So you tell me, Dan, what skills do you think are important for this thing?
So that does make sense. So I think that intimidation, definitely. I think that would be important because, again, the nonviolent de-escalation. If that's possible, I can intimidate you guys. You would just leave, and everything's fine. I think that athletics, just because, I feel like a lot of the fighting and a lot of the a lot of the things this bouncer is going to do is physical. So athletics does make sense. I feel like. I feel like some of the other ones, like there's really no need to perception. No, that's not even a part of this. That's already done.
Yeah.
I'm trying to run down the list right now in my head. Does it need some kind of knowledge? Like, would it need some sort of a lore or some kind of knowledge check that would help it?
You could give it a lore, but that's pretty unusual in monsters unless you want to give them something really specific. If you wanted to just be able to recognize people and be like, oh, this person's on the guest list because I know who they are, then it probably needs society for that.
Okay, perfect.
You could also consider, whether or not it needs diplomacy or something like that, but I don't think this is the sort of monster that makes friends.
No.
And
I don't think diplomacy is a thing for it.
Yeah, and I don't think it needs deception, right? Because I don't think it's going to be necessarily lying to people. So yeah, I mean, maybe society is the only other thing it needs.
Okay.
I don't know. There's a whole bunch of skills like stealth. Does it need stealth? Does it need to be able to kind of sneaky approach people? Does it need acrobatics? No, that doesn't seem like its thing. It's certainly not going to need thievery or survival or anything like that.
No. So this is basically the part where when you think about the character and start describing its traits, this is what it does. Like and you're just using these skills to help describe that thing.
And ultimately, when building a monster, I think it's important to note that you don't want to really add things that don't have any context. So if you give it medicine, it needs a reason to have medicine that isn't just, I don't know, maybe it could heal someone. Well, why would it do that? That's not even in its... So maybe we're good with that skill list. It's not a huge skill list, but it doesn't need to be. Most monsters never even use their skills. So, all right. So let's try and figure these out. Again, I like to go back to the, if I just give it its ability score and its level and a minimum of 2, what number do I get? And for athletics, that's going to be creature level 6 plus 5 for strength, plus 2 more. That's a total of 13. If we look back at the table, 13 is a moderate for a 6th level creature. The high is 15, so maybe we want to go 15 because this creature is good at tossing people around.
Yeah, okay. I like that.
So let's go ahead and give it a plus 15. Now, intimidation is going to be different, right? Because 6 plus 3 is going to be 9, plus 2 is 11. That gets us into the low category for intimidation. I think you could go to 13 if you wanted, right? Add another 2 in there. That's probably okay. But I wouldn't go any higher than that. I mean, it's just not charismatic enough. And, you know, scary, sure, it can intimidate folks, but it's not the world class at it. The barbarian in the group's going to stare at it and be like, yeah, come on, buddy, let's tango. So I don't know. What are you feeling there? 11, 13?
I think 13. We're talking about intimidation still.
Yeah.
I think 13. If we can go to 13, let's do that.
Yeah,
I'm happy with that.
We totally can.
Okay.
So, okay, we got that. And then society. Now, society for this thing is not going to be good. And that's okay, right? This should be something it's not great at, but it's something that it can do. So it's the minimum here is going to be like 7. We could get that up to a 9. We could also just leave it at 7, right? It could be really terrible at this, but
right. Well, it's one of those things where I feel like if it's society based around his immediate area and this restaurant, then maybe it should be good. But if they're like, hey, do you know a good blacksmith in the nearest town? They shouldn't. They should know that restaurant and particularly their station, like where they're posted up as the bouncer. And that's kind of it. That's what I think.
All right, so I think we're going to keep this nice and low at like 9.
Cool.
Something it can do, something it's not going to be super reliable on, but it is something it can do. Okay, so there we go. We now have the entire top of the stat block is done, right? We know its traits. We don't know its name yet, Dan. I'm going to let you keep noodling on that as we go along here. I'll ask for that at the end. So let's keep moving here. So let me go ahead and look now at, there's a bit here on safe items. These are the items you can give it that won't distort the party's treasure. We're not really going to worry too much about giving it a bunch of items. This isn't the sort of creature that's covered in magic items, I don't think.
Okay.
So let's skip that. Let's instead go straight to armor class. Armor class for this thing is going to range from 21 to 27. Those are the extremes. Dan, this is also a good point in time to talk, kind of hit points, saving throws, and armor class. Generally speaking, it's good to kind of think about all of them together because these are really its key defensive abilities. And if we're like, okay, this is the thought behind this creature, we want to do that in a way that they all play together. So, all right, we already know it's a big bruiser. That's kind of its thing. So having a lot of hit points is going to be a thing it's good at. That maybe means it doesn't have a super high AC. You generally don't want to do high AC, lots of hit points, kind of ever, because that means the fight is just grindy and slow and not very fun. You also don't want to do the opposite. Low AC, low hit points means that the thing's just going to go down like a sack of potatoes. You kind of want one of those to be kind of high and the other one to be low, or you want them both to be average. And the more you push either way, the more you want to push the other side. And then saving throws just kind of play into that to be like, okay, well, if it's got kind of some lousy saves as well, that's also going to play into its hit points, especially if it's reflex save. Because that means it's going to fail a lot of area of effect spells and take a lot more damage. So that's kind of where we're at, Dan. What do you see for this creature in terms of that mix?
Well, I mean, I picture it being pretty easy to hit. I'm not going to lie, but the effects of those hits, it's going to take a while. Like that. That's what I'm thinking. It's not hard to kick a brick. It's just sitting there. So it's pretty easy to tap with your toe, but it's going to be really hard to kick a brick in half. So that's how I feel. So
okay, so we're looking at a pretty low AC then for the creature. Again, I go back to the same thing. If I take its level and its dex and add a minimum of 2, and then add 10 because we're talking about AC, we're already looking at a minimum AC of 19. But that doesn't take into account that maybe its flesh is tough and it gets an armor bonus, right? So at this point in time, we really can just kind of pick whatever number we want. 21 is kind of is as low as we should probably go. Below that, it'll get crit all the time. Mm-hmm. So maybe we go 21. 22 and 23 are also possible. 23 is moderate. So if we go moderate, that's kind of getting to the point where that's the expected AC for a creature of this level. But we want this to be low, so it should probably be 21 or 22.
Okay, all right, let's go 22.
Okay,
if you'll allow it, and I feel like
Dan, it's your monster. If you want to make a broken monster, we'll figure it out. But
well, look, that'll be the follow-up video next week. We'll make a broken monster.
yeah. That's called making a dragon. They're good at everything.
Oh, dude. Okay. That would be fun. Okay. That's for something else. Like the difference between designing a regular encounter monster and designing something like this is a dragon. This is going to be a thing.
I think there is an important thing to understand that when we're designing monsters of a level, there are some monsters that we consider to be kind of iconic Apex monsters, and they are the best of class. And dragons certainly fall into that. But this is an undead bouncer. It doesn't need to be best in class. So
okay, perfect.
Level 6 saving throws range from 17 to 11. Anything below that starts to get really terrible. So if we look at fort, we're at a minimum of +9, +11 is the lowest it could really be. I think this creature is probably got a pretty decent fort of at least like +13, 14, maybe 15 even.
Let's go 14. I feel like I am trying to not build this thing super powerful.
Yeah.
Even though my initial thought is when you're like, well, it's a range of this to this, I'm like, let's go to the highest one. But that's not. We're not doing that. Like we're trying to make that's a bouncer.
In fact, now that we're on to the next stat, its reflex should actually probably be pretty bad. Because it doesn't have a good dex. We kind of know that already. It's going to have a fair amount of hit points. So if we're looking at that, the reflex maybe should be in the low range of like +11.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair.
And that it's just bad at will saves. Now, reflex saves. Now its will save should be a bit better. But not great either. Its wisdom isn't huge. We're at a minimum of 10 here. 12 is quite possible. You could go as high as like 14 without raising too many red flags, I don't think. But somewhere in there. You could go 13, 12, 14. You probably don't want to go 14. It probably shouldn't have a
that seems high, right?
As good as its fort save.
Okay. So 11, I think.
Well, 11 is the same as its reflex save, and it does have a slightly better. So maybe 12?
12. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true.
its reflex save is based off Dex, which is a +1. Its will save is based off Wisdom, that's a +2, right? So the fact that they're one off from each other, kind of makes sense. It's fine. Right?
Okay, yeah, I'm down with that.
All right, so now we're going to get into hit points. Now, when we start looking at hit points, this is also where we might start looking at resistances and weaknesses and things like that. Now, we've already given it some immunities. That's things that just don't affect it. In addition to that, creatures can have weaknesses and resistances. Weaknesses mean that the creature takes more damage when it takes damage of a certain type. Resistances means that the creature takes less damage when it takes damage of a certain type. If you give it either one of those, that should affect its hit points. Generally speaking, you kind of add or remove some hit points based on what its immunities are, because you expect that based on what its weaknesses or resistances are, because like if it's a troll, you give it more hit points because you know the PCs are going to throw fire at it, and it's got a little bit more give on that, so you kind of assume that. But the reverse is also true. If it's a fire giant, you kind of take away a little bit of hit points because it's immune to one entire classification of damage. There's a little bit of balance in there. If we do want to consider giving this thing any resistances or weaknesses, we'll probably only give it 5. So it's like, oh, it has resist fire 5, or it has weakness fire 5. But we don't have to give it either. It doesn't necessarily have to have any of these. Now, we can do what is done with, like, if you look at zombies, right? They have weakness to slashing damage. Because if you cut them open, they come to pieces. But like bludgeoning and the other things don't do any extra damage to them, but slashing does, right? So that is a feature of zombies. They have a ton of hit points, but they take extra damage whenever you hit them with a long sword, which is pretty common. So now we've also already said that this creature is going to be high in the hit points because it has kind of a lower AC. So let's take a look at what its hit point range is. Its hit point range is anywhere from like 123, all the way down to as low as like 65. So we definitely don't want it on the low end. We definitely do want it in the high end, so somewhere north of 100. Doesn't have to be hugely north of 100. It could be 110, could be 115. 115 is in range for high. But mind you, we didn't tank its AC as hard as we could. So maybe it's just sitting at like 110.
Yeah. Well, it's like comfortably, but it's kind of between the two. Yeah. That makes sense.
Let's give it 110 for now and just see if that holds up as we kind of do some different things here. Now,
okay.
We have some. Do you see this creature as being particularly resilient to any forms of damage, or particularly weak to them? It doesn't have to be. Not all creatures are. Just because the line is here doesn't mean it's something we have to include.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I feel like it's not like he was. This character was sought out because of its famous resistance to X. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And I don't mean ecstasy. I mean X as in whatever that could be. You know?
Yeah. No roofing the door guard. Yeah.
To be clear, he loves ecstasy. I'm just going to say that right now. So
I'm not putting that in the notes.
Oh, damn it.
All right. So maybe it doesn't have any resistances or weaknesses. That's fine. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove these. Goodbye. Now, there's a space on here for defensive abilities. Again, this is a thing that not all creatures have, but maybe this creature does have. So this is the place where we might put something that isn't something that it reactively uses, or that it could be a reaction. But this is also a place where you just put weird abilities that are defensive in nature. It's not something you do to someone. It's something that it's immune to or protected from. And we don't... one thing I don't want to do here is get off into the languages of rules language. Right now, we're just going to kind of just write what we want it to do, and you can go back and turn it into kind of proper, well-formed rules language whenever you want.
Okay.
But So it's already immune to things like death effects, disease, paralyze, poison, and sleep. Do we want it to be like immune to like being able to be moved or pushed around? Like is it's the like we could think about it from that angle. Like maybe this is the undead that you can't move it. If it's guarding the door, you have to destroy it.
Okay. See, now this is the part where you know, your input is actually very valuable because I don't think about things like that.
Sure.
I'm like, well, what would if I was in the party, what would my party do? And I'm like, well, they would, you know, magic missile, they would put it on fire, they would do all kinds of stuff. But a very basic thing is, yeah, let's just like force this thing out of the way, and it can't be moved. I like that idea because that's also way on brand for a bouncer.
So I'm just going to put an ability in here that's just called immovable right now. And it just says, you know, this creature cannot be pushed, shoved, or otherwise moved. And that's not a great rule sentence. I'm not going to pretend that it is. But for the purposes of this seminar, that'll do for now.
Yeah.
You could always come back and make it tighter later. Okay. So it's got a defensive ability. I think it's one that's pretty flavorful. If we come up with more, we can always add more. But we'll leave it at that for now.
Okay.
Speed. This is just kind of what do you think the creature should be able to do? I don't think this creature can fly or burrow or anything like that, so it's probably just got a land speed. The average speed of a character is 25 feet. I don't think this thing quite has an average speed, though. It feels to me like it's slow.
I was just thinking that. I was like, can it be less than average? Because I think 25 is generous.
Yeah. So what do you think? 20?
I think 20. Yeah, I think 20 is good.
There we go. All right, so we got 20. All right. There we go. So I've got some space here for some attack rolls. Now you'll notice here I've already got the symbols in. These are done, by the way, if you're curious how these things work, because they are tricky. You'll notice the moment I deleted a character, it turned into text. That is because this is a special font called Pathfinder Icons. You can get it through the compatibility license. And what it is it is a plain text that when you turn on ligatures and type in the right phrase, it automatically turns into its ligature, which is the action. So if
that's cool. I love
the bracket in. Oh, sorry, and I have to do it this way. It turns back into the action. Now,
Jason, is that something we can link to up above?
It's in the Pathfinder compatibility license. I'll put a link in the description.
Okay, perfect.
So you can also say, oh, I want this to be 2 actions. And
that is
into the
cool.
2 action symbol. So if you're wondering how I got those in there, that's how those get in there. Yeah. I actually built that font myself. It is licensed to me and Sarah Robinson. We are the creators of that font.
Oh, that's cool.
So
that's really cool.
It is the only font I have ever made. All right. So that is how the action symbol font works. Now we've got some 1-action attacks here. We probably don't want them to be not 1 action, so we'll leave them at that. We might be able to make a argument for the ranged attack, but let's talk about that here in a sec. Let's start with its melee attack, and it sounds to me like this creature wants to be making a fist attack.
Yeah. That's how I picture it anyway.
Yeah. So it's definitely going to be a fist attack. One thing I just realized I forgot is up here in hit points, I need to put negative healing because it's undead.
Oh, right.
Nearly forgot that. All right. So we got that in there. So fist attack. Let's get back to the chart. Let's go to the attack chart. So here's the strike attack bonus chart. The next page has the strike damage chart. Let's start with the attack bonuses first, and then we'll get to the damages here, because the damage is the one spot where this is actually a little tricky. So it's level 6. Its attack bonus can be anywhere from 17 to 12. I think this thing's probably on the higher end. Its minimum should be a 13. I think we might want to keep this, maybe its fist is really good. Maybe it is a 17. Maybe it is.
I'm in. I am in. Jason, I like your idea. Let's go with that.
I'm just working with what you gave me. All right, so we do have a spot here for any traits. If you look, this is where we would put like agile or finesse. But I think actually because we've given it a very high attack bonus, we don't want it to have agile or finesse. This isn't an agile or finesse creature, but it's going to try and hit you once, and it's going to have a really good chance of that, but its other attacks are going to fall off pretty quick. So if you give it agile, that means all of its attacks are going to be a bit more likely to hit. What we usually like to do in a stat block, one thing that you want to do when you're building a monster, is when you're looking at its various attacks, you want to think about them from the angle of, if it has 3 attacks, if one is demonstrably better than the others, why would it ever use the other one? Right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes what we do is we're like, oh, okay, so it's got this one attack that hits at a very high bonus and does very good damage, but it falls off really quick, and it has this lesser attack that's agile that doesn't do as much damage, but you might want to swap over to it because you have a better chance of hitting.
Okay.
I'm not sure that this creature even needs that, but that's something you want to do when you're kind of thinking about it. So
yeah. So can I just really quick ask what I think I'm kind of picking up on already, but just to confirm. Yeah. So when you're building a monster, you don't necessarily need to follow the same type of rules that you would if you were creating a PC.
No.
Like you can fudge stuff like a lot more if you wanted to. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Yeah. For some reason that just clicked as you were talking about that. I was like, wait, we can kind of do what we want with this. Okay. I gotcha.
we totally can, right? And honestly, most of your attacks with the fist don't come with anything, right? So maybe this just doesn't have any traits, and that's okay. So let's just go ahead and remove the trait line here from this one because it doesn't have one. Now, while we're here, we did also talk about doing maybe it can throw things at you. Now, we might want to give it an offensive ability that says it can pick things up and throw things at you, but we might still want to include it as a ranged attack just so it's easy for folks to understand. So I'm just going to put a thing in here that's just thrown item. And you'll be like, huh, that's odd. But then down here in abilities, we might give it an ability called throw anything.
Okay.
So
yeah, I mean, that's very descriptive.
And this ability maybe isn't even a action, right? Because not every ability needs to be an action. Mm-hmm. Maybe this isn't one. And instead, it's just a thing that says, this creature can pick up any adjacent item and throw it. This is done as part of the attack action. So it's like firing a bow. It doesn't need to spend an action to pick something up. It can just pick up a mug and throw it at you. It doesn't need to spend an extra action to pick up a thing. That's kind of what I'm letting it do here. And that's based primarily off what you described. Now, I could not include that sentence and make this an action that says, as an action, it can reach into any nearby space and pick up an item and throw it. I could make that an action, but basically that means this ranged attack is going to be so terrible that it's never going to do it. Because it's always going to be a better option just to go up and punch him a few times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I kind of picture the throw thing as a way of, like I'm gonna punch you if I can, but also, oh, you're kind of too far away right now. Let me throw something at you while I pummel somebody else. Like that's kind of how I picture it.
It's also good to give a creature a ranged attack so that it can attack flying characters or characters who are otherwise just out of reach. Otherwise, there's kind of the easy win button of, well, I'm just going to float up here and you can't get me and I'll just shoot arrows at you until you die.
He's just grasping like a Scooby-Doo character.
Oh, stop stabbing me in the head. Yeah, no, it's terrible. Okay, so we got a thrown item attack here. This is not going to be a great attack though, right? Because honestly, it's a big bruiser. It's there to punch you with its fist. But
is it fair to say that maybe the thrown thing is kind of more of an annoyance and like it's not nothing, but it's also it's just kind of more annoying depending,
So let's go ahead and call it let's see, it can be as low as 12. I am going to be tempted to put it down that far. So let's see, it's going to be 7, 9. Let's put it at 13.
113. Nope, you already put it. You took your finger off the piece, Jason. It's there. No. Damn it.
we do have that. Now, one thing that we could do is there is a trait that we could give it that says it doesn't use its dex, it uses its strength on thrown attacks, right? We could give it, I think it's called brutal. So we could give it the brutal trait, which would then give us plenty of room to treat this as much higher, right? Maybe instead then it's more like 15.
Okay.
We still don't want it to be as good as its fist.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, there is another trait we definitely want to put in here, and that is the range of this. And since it's a random thrown item, it should not have a good range. So this should be thrown like 10 feet, right?
Well, even more so fitting into the brand of what we're trying to build here.
Yeah.
This is going to take place in a room. This is most likely where the bouncer, this isn't an offensive thing. It's very much like you're in my space. Yeah. So I think that's 100% perfect.
Sure. So I think we're in a good spot there on that. Let's go on to damage. And for folks who are watching this on YouTube, I do see a bunch of great ideas popping up in chat. That's the great thing about monster design. You can take this in a bunch of different ways, right? You can be like, oh, it's got an ability that allows it to stun for a bit. Oh, it's got an ability to, have a surge of strength and stuff like that, right? There's a bunch of different ways you can play these sorts of creatures, and you can kind of play with it and make it be what you want it to be. So let's talk damage here, just to keep things moving. Because I don't want to go down to every permutation, but there is a lot of different things. If you look at the strike damage, it basically gives damage ranges, and then it gives numbers in parentheses. So for 6th level, like the high is 2d8 plus 9, and then it says 18. That 18 means that the average is about 18. So you don't have to do those dice. You can do different dice as long as the average comes out to about 18. So this thing does have a strength of 5. So the bonus should definitely be 5 or more. It could be like 5 or, whatever number you want that's higher than 5. But because it's attacking with its fist, it should definitely be adding at least its strength to whatever dice you're rolling. But the key here is that we're looking for a damage range somewhere between 15 and 18 on average. And when you're thinking about how much a die contributes to the average damage, the easy way to do that is take the number of sides, divide by 2, and add 1/2. Okay. So for a d6, it's 6-sided. You divide that by 2. It's 3 plus 1/2. Every d6 die you add is about 3.5 points of damage. And it's 3.5 because there is no 0 on the die. It goes 1 to 6, right? So when you add all those numbers together and then divide by 6, the number you get is 3. So a d12 adds 6.5. So in this case, if we're looking for something around, we don't want it to be too high because it does have a very high attack bonus. So generally speaking, this gets back to like the AC hit point thing. If its attack bonus is super high, you don't want its damage to also be super high. But in this case, this creature is really kind of a one-trick pony. Its big thing that it does is hit you with its fist. So we do want the fist to be something that is something that the players want to avoid. But because it doesn't have any beneficial traits on it, it's not going to hit too often. So I think it's okay here to shoot high on this. And, go for something like, 2D. I mean, you could even go as high as like 2D10.
10. I was just thinking, can we do 2D10? Yeah. Is that crazy?
Let's. I mean, so 2D10 plus 5 is going to be an average, because remember, each D10 is going to add 5.5. So 2 of them is going to be 11. So if we do 2D10 plus 5, the average damage there is 16. That is within range. It's a little higher than moderate, but it's not quite up to high. That's a pretty good damage. Now, what type is it? It's going to be bludgeoning damage, right?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and add a bit in here, Dan, because this is one of those places where what's this monster really good at? Well, it's supposed to be good at kind of blocking ways and preventing people from going where they're not supposed to. So I'm going to say that it has a special on this, plus grab.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So what I'm doing there, Dan, is I'm throwing my mind forward to the fight. And does it just sit there and punch you a bunch? Or does it punch you and then grab you as its second action? So what the grab ability does is it says after you successfully make an attack, you can spend another action to automatically grapple someone. That's going to be really important because I think we can write a cool special ability about that.
Okay.
Figure that out.
Which also restraint is a very bouncer thing where it's like, I'm going to smack you, but also I'm going to grab you. And I like that. Yeah, that's really good.
So yeah, this is me just playing with the kind of concept that you've already worked out. So, and now let's get to this thrown item. I don't think this should do a lot of damage. I think this is more of a nuisance thing. So, let's see here. If we look at 6th, we can drop this down to like 2D. It could be 2d6 plus 5, right? And then we're talking about 12 average damage, which is low. I think we do want to go down somewhere near that level. Because it is a thrown weapon, we will go ahead and add strength to it as normal. I'm going to put type here. I'm going to put bludgeoning or slashing, because he's kind of throwing random items at you. If he throws a chair at you, it's going to be bludgeoning. If he throws a glass at you, it's probably slashing as it hits you and shatters. If I could spell bludgeoning, that would help.
Yeah. Just right click on it. It'll make it right for you.
There you go. I got it. I got there eventually. So we're going to say that this does bludgeoning or slashing damage. Now, Dan, there's really only a couple more steps here. I alluded to this earlier. We talked about maybe giving it some ability where it can throw. So I'm going to call this ability Eject Guest.
I like it.
and I don't... Now, this is where we have to think about how we want its turn to go. If it punches you, grabs you, and then throws you, if we want it to be able to do all three of those things, the throw action can also only be one action.
Okay.
If we want it to be like, oh, it punches you, grabs you, and then next round has to throw you, like you get a chance to break free or do something before it tosses you, then we should make it 2 actions. That way it's impossible for it to do it. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I feel like I feel like there should be a chance to get saved on that one. I feel like that should be a 2 action thing.
Okay. So
personally,
the upside to that is that, I mean, I think that means that we can make it more brutal, right? So if it does do this, it's really bad. So we've turned it into 2 actions.
Because it's more difficult, that means it's harder to do that. Like, you can't do the grab unless you've done the punch. Is that how we're seeing that?
Yeah, so the basically for it to throw you, it needs to punch you, successfully hit you, then spend its next action to grab you, and now it doesn't have 2 actions. So it can't then throw you. But if on its if you remain grappled until the start of its next turn, it can throw you. So I think what that means is what you want to do here is kind of figure out how would this actually work. So in this case, I would say the creature throws another creature. This is normally where I would put its name. I have a name. Okay, what's the name?
We're going with Steve.
Steve. Okay, its name is Steve. All right. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to change this to Steve can pick up any adjacent item and throw it. Steve cannot be pushed, shoved, or otherwise moved. Steve throws a creature it has grappled. Steve makes a athletics check versus the target's we're going to say fortitude DC.
Okay.
So what I'm doing is I'm saying when it decides to throw somebody, it makes an athletics check, which is something we've already said is really good. And it uses the fortitude DC of the target, which is basically kind of how big and sturdy is the creature. So, you basically take the creature's fortitude and add 10 to it. And that's the check it's making.
Okay.
If successful, The target is thrown 20 feet in a direction of Steve's choosing. 30 feet on a critical success. If thrown into an object, the target stops and takes 1d6 bludgeoning damage for each 5 feet not traveled.
Oh, nice. Oh, so it's got inertia damage in there.
Yeah,
is what you're saying.
So if it throws you and it just throws you 20 feet into an open square, you just land. You know?
I love this.
The target lands prone. So if it just throws you 20 feet, you just land prone and you're 20 feet away. But if it throws you instead into a wall that's 10 feet away, you travel 10 feet and then take 2d6 and land prone.
Oh, wow. So, I love this.
So let's play around, something like that, right? This is kind of, and I grok that this is kind of some of the more advanced design of this. This is the hardest part of designing a creature, is just imagining how it might work, how its abilities might function, how it could do its thing in combat. And you said, hey, maybe it throws its guests out. Maybe it uses athletics. Great, let's talk about that. Let's give it an ability that allows it to do that is fun and entertaining. So here we are. We've got Steve who can eject guests. Throwing them out of the place makes
make a athletics check, please.
Yeah. I let autocorrect fix some of your terrible grammar. That's another important step of creating a monster. Now this monster isn't in a publishable format yet. I would go through and rewrite half these abilities and make them kind of tight rules language based on Pathfinder. But for your home game, frankly, this is probably good enough. You don't have to worry too much about whether or not everything is specifically tight, because you can adjust it on the fly if you realize it wasn't quite doing what you needed it to do.
Right.
So Dan, that's it.
We got Steve.
That's it. That's Steve. Now, you would normally at the end of this kind of just go back through and make sure all of your assumptions make sense. Make sure that you created something that works. That is like, okay, I see why it would want to throw an item, why that's better. I see maybe I go back in and I'm like, you know what? It could use a better intimidation ability. Like maybe I write another ability that allows it to intimidate and scare people. And maybe it can do that. Right, and it works like intimidation plus, and it can do it against everybody in a group, right? So you could go back in and add another ability that just says mighty spooky, right? And Steve is mighty spooky, so when he glowers at you, he can intimidate the whole group as one. Great, that's fine. You could go back in and add those things, but frankly, this monster, as it's written right now, is ready for prime time.
So a couple of things I'm just curious about, and not necessarily important to Steve, because Steve, I feel like, is, no pun intended, very fleshed out. So how often, if you're doing a homebrew, how often do you find yourself just taking a stock monster from the book versus creating your own monster?
I think, whenever I'm writing an adventure or running an adventure, I try and do a mix. I mostly rely on monsters from the Bestiaries because they're easy, and frankly, they're part of the kind of common weave and tapestry of the world that everybody understands. So you want to use those monsters because the players know them, and that's part of the kind of shared story of the game. I also like to throw in new monsters because I like to keep my players on their toes. Right? Yeah. I certainly have done that recently with, some of the stuff I've been doing for Eventide, the adventure we've been playing, right? There's one of the first monsters you fight is an animated coat rack. Just a different kind of creature. I invented that creature. That's not from anywhere. I invented that. Why? Because I thought it was funny. But you intrinsically kind of know what it is. So a monster like Steve here maybe is unique. Maybe there isn't more than one Steve. There's just the Steve in this place. He's a special, unique monster, and that's all he needs to be. And that's fine too. But yeah, I do kind of mix it up just to, let everybody know that we're all playing the same game, but also mixing it up so that everybody doesn't feel like they know what's around every.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I like Steve. I can't wait to actually take this stat block, throw Steve into a game at some point. It's going to be great.
Well, let's hop back here, because I think that's kind of it, right? That's frankly how the monster design process works. That's, you know, I think it can seem intimidating at first, especially if you're familiar with Pathfinder First Edition, which had kind of complex formulas you had to follow. With Pathfinder Second Edition, it's a lot more about just kind of figuring out what your concept is, and then making those numbers make sense with the concept that you're trying to do. So,
it really quick, if I can, it just feels more fluid. It feels more real. I don't know. I don't know the word to say, but you're basically envisioning, what is this creature? What is it like? What's its personality? Let's build it around that, which I think is dope. I love that.
Yeah. The design here is concept first. And in that, once you've got your concept solid, everything else just kind of clicks into place, and the answers kind of come easy, which is why, you know, frankly, like I said, when you get really good at this, you know, and you know what the numbers are on the table, you can kind of do it on the fly, right? You can kind of just ad hoc bash together a monster. And, you know, frankly, you can also look at existing monsters and be like, yeah, you know, maybe if I did want to make Steve, what I could actually do is just grab the mummy stat block, strip off the resistance that I don't want him to have, bump up his hit points a little bit to compensate, give him this throw ability and eject guest abilities, and call it good, right? He's almost there anyway.
Now, obviously 100%.
The mummy has a bunch of stuff I don't want, right? I don't want Steve to be giving people mummy rot. But I, you know, frankly, giving him an ability to throw people around and stuff might make up for it. So maybe we swap those things out. Maybe we tweak some other numbers to in that. At the mummy tends to be a little bit lower hit points, a little higher AC. So I'd want to swap those things around, right? You know, but you can do those at the table without too much.
Yeah, absolutely. I found this will be, I actually, that this was more fun than I thought it was going to be. I'm not going to lie. When we talked about this, I was like, fun, can't wait. And I actually really enjoyed this. So
yeah, going into this, I realize it can be a little intimidating, but Dan, you made a great monster. Steve is a lot of fun.
Steve is amazing.
So there we go, everybody. That's another tutorial. We'll be back next week with more exciting tutorials. Make sure to subscribe to the channel here and like the videos if you want to see more, if you want to see these pop up on your feed. Other than that, you can find both Dan and I on all the various social media platforms. I'm at / Jason Bulmahn. Dan, you're at
twitch.tv dan_servo. Come join me.
There you go. So thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you've been enjoying these, and we will see you next time.